Transparency and generosity in employee pay packages while hiring for startups isn't a very common trait seen amongst entrepreneurs who swear by frugality. Yet, our guest today defies that norm. With a mission to solve healthcare for 1.3 billion Indians, Even provides access to affordable and high quality healthcare for all Indians. In our conversation today, Marty speaks about ways to hire the best talent and how India is no longer catching up with the West when it comes to the startup ecosystem. She also talks about a very important point, which is the three absolute must not do's when it comes to raising funds for your startup and her learnings as a second time entrepreneur. Now, let's hear what this CXO talks. Welcome to today's episode of CXO Talks, Marty. I'm so glad that I'm having you here because one thing that I do know that you bring to the table is the nuance of not just an entrepreneur as a CXO, but also as somebody who actively invests into startups. So a very warm welcome to this show. And it is a cold winter morning in Delhi. And I'm giving you my warmth from here as much as I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Sonia. It's great to be here. Obviously, I heard about the podcast, so really, really excited. In Bangalore, it's quite sunny. So, yeah, I heard in Delhi it's really, really bad. So, yeah, great to be here.
It is. Mari, one thing that I kind of am intrigued in the recent development across AI ML is how ChatGPT has come into picture. And one thing that I do know about you is that you have in 2019 had your own startup, which was based on machine learning and it was in journalism. I would love to know your insights on how you have seen things develop and how do you perceive things to be going forward from here and what do you see as the use cases that will be evolving from here on?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So, when I started my first company, it was only, I think, yeah, 2018, 2019, actually a little bit earlier. But at the time, all of this was actually in infancy, right? Like you did not have such amazing models. And there was a lot of talk about, how hard it is to get there. The fact that, you've got like massive corporations like Microsoft and Google having access to proprietary data sets and they would be the ones leading the way, right? But I think it's like remarkable what, the US developments have shown, right? Like the level of accuracy and even like creativity in a way is absolutely astonishing. And I don't think that many people would have thought we would be here now with this level of accuracy and just reliability, right? Like I guess I've played with it. Everybody has played with it, and the answers are like very, very compelling. In a way, like biggest worry that I have is that answers are even too compelling and believable. And sometimes, one thing that it does not do is like fact checking, right? So you might have a very compelling answer, but you're not entirely sure that's true. That is the truth, right? And so I guess there are obvious, risks about that, as well as how much machines will dominate the entire world from medicine to law to journalism. I guess like in a way that's a very good starting point for somebody, let's say, doing a research, but it can't only answer, right? And we need to make sure as a society that while being fast and being free is really really cool, right? And you can get that basic. You actually incentivize like original research, which costs money and is sometimes incredibly frustrating and things like that. So as long as you know you, you get that check and you're sure that that's like just a starting point, I think it's a very cool place to be. This just in general. Then obviously when it comes to investments, I guess like all of this sector will become very hyped. I guess like the next Web3. Um, I think also for obvious reasons, right? Does have an impact to really revolutionize like so many industries. Um, and I guess we've seen like a lot of rounds of investment, both in like Europe and the US, I guess like Jasper, the copy editor just raised that over 1 billion, yeah, I think 1.5. Then you've got Stable in the UK that just raised that over 1 billion. It's a very interesting like sector for sure to be investing in, researching in, and just be like a witness as a consumer.
Yeah, I think it is definitely an interesting time, and I I agree to the fact that you say that facts are still something that cannot be verified. But the kind of insights that came even from Sundar Pichai speaking at the Google conference recently and experimenting with ChatGPT was very interesting. So it does make for an interesting use case, but there's still a lot to do for sure. And investments, like you said, are heating up in this sector. Talking about investments and talking about you as an investor and you also as somebody who is an operating founder in Even, I would love to know, what is it that, from an investor perspective and from an entrepreneur perspective, what are the internal compass and beliefs that you operate from, and are they different when you are an investor and when you are an entrepreneur? Or do you kind of see there's an overlap of the way that you operate as an investor and as an entrepreneur?
I think, yeah, very interesting question. So I guess obviously the role that you have as an entrepreneur and an investor are, is completely, utterly different, right? As an entrepreneur, you need to be, working really on the on one thing, being completely obsessed with it, running, the day to day and everything. Whereas obviously being an investor is such a like passive role in a way, right? But I think in terms of like what guides me, I guess these two roles really speak to each other, right? In the sense that obviously I'm a founder, so I have gone through all of the problems that normally entrepreneurs face, especially like at the early stage, right? Setting up a team, setting up a company, getting to product market fit and everything else. And obviously it helps me a lot when I invest, fundraising, right? Fundraising zero, fundraising on your fundraising in hype markets and down markets. I've done it all. So obviously I've made many mistakes, and I hope I got a few learnings that might be helpful to founders, and so far has been great. And at the same time, like being an investor really helps me being, in a way, a better entrepreneur, right? Like one of the things that I really love is to, speak to founders about the things that they're also going through that might be helpful for me, right? Like how do you scale a sales team? How do you, hire the best talent and everything else? Like we constantly each other. And there are some companies that I invested in and now, are Series E. They've got teams of 2,000 people. They're doing lots of interesting things that now scale to, millions of dollars of revenue a year, and so they can help me as well. And I guess in terms of like the moral compass of what I look for, in a way, it's kind of similar. So one of the things that I've learned is that, and it's very basic, but actually there are so many things that come from it. It's like how important it is to have an outstanding team, right? And because that's really, I think, the key to success, we have set up even many like frameworks that help us hire the best talent. For example, we are incredibly generous with equity. We are transparent with salaries that every person has at Even. And these are like just two examples of how we do things here. But at the same time, when somebody comes to me, right, a founder setting up a company, one of the questions I ask that I don't think many people ask, especially in this is like, hey, cool, like how big is your option, right? Because that shows me like how you're thinking about it. That shows me how generous you are. That shows me like potentially the talent that you might get and things like that. So I guess like there are a few things that are really important. One of them being the team. Others are like the speed of execution and everything else that are important on both fronts. So yeah, I don't think it's particularly different, but obviously the role is like entirely different.
Interesting. And I would love to zoom into the fact, you talked about hiring outstanding team members, and that's how startups really perform well. I think a mark of great startups is also the kind of team that they hire. But zoom into me, you talked about generosity, you talked about transparency, you talked about the options, you talked about, so basically the ESOP pool. Help me understand, help my audience here on CXO Talks also understand, if they are an aspiring entrepreneur or they are building already or they are CXOs in various ventures that they are in. How can they get better at hiring great talent? Help me talk to me about, how are you generous? What can they do better when it comes to generosity? How can they set up transparent systems? And when it comes to ESOP pools, what is it that they need to know to be able to do it better? And it is in a time we're living where we are getting inspired with a lot of founders who are coming on Shark Tank. We're talking valuations, we're talking about equity, but there's still a lot more that startups and entrepreneurs need to know. So I would love to get your insights on building great talent and pulling in great team members.
Well, we could stay here for hours and hours. Maybe the thing that I'm most obsessed about. I guess the first thing to say that unfortunately, and this is a global problem, not many, even like outstanding operators that have been in the business for decades, have a very good understanding of equity, how it vests, how it works, how do you make money from it. And so many times during the negotiation, people focus on salaries. Salaries are great, are very important, but at the same time, it's not how you create wealth, right? And even when it comes to negotiating all of these terms, how important it is as a company to make sure that the person you're speaking to truly understands how it works, right? So for us, we actually offer everybody, just to give you an example, we offer everybody that joins Even the possibility of speaking to a lawyer of their choice to actually review our right? Our ESOP policies are the same for employees as they are for myself. So basically for the founders. And this is really unique in the global context and even more in India, right? So in a way, it's like understanding what it means, and that's like the first step, right? And then the second is just as a founder, understanding that if you want, talent that is the best in the market, you also need to give them a package that is the best in the market, right? And in a way that goes a little bit like it's counterintuitive, right? Because as a founder, you often think, and this is unfortunate, you think, hey, let's keep as much equity as possible so I'll become like super rich. But the problem with that is that you might see yourself, let's say 5 years in, with a company that isn't worth much because the talent that you had was not outstanding, so it could not deliver outstanding results. So you have like an entire pie, that pie really small and like potentially really bad and really shit, right? Whereas having a small piece of an amazing thing that is growing is much, much better. So yeah, I think like being generous is the number one priority that we had from really day one. Being generous just means being like several times better than the market, right? So for junior positions, for mid position, and especially for like directors as well, super important to be best in class and to offer much more equity than the rest of the market. And I guess like the just move from like equity to transparency because I don't want to talk too much, but like interrupt me if you have further questions on anything I say. On the transparency, right? We release publicly, and a lot of people have shared this, and it went a little bit viral actually. Our framework for salaries and equity. So for each and every position, we have a publicly available, resource where people, let's say, want to apply for a role in marketing. They can see like 10 different levels, what we want from this different level, what are the skill set that we think are applicable, and then what would be your salary at that level, and what would be your salary if you get promoted over and over, right? And this helps like new candidates actually get an understanding of what your offer will be because we don't negotiate. That's the offer, that's the salary, that's the equity you're gonna get. And we know that's best in the market anyway. But even if it's not, there's no negotiation. That's kind of how we set up upfront what we want. But what it has actually created something even more interesting, which is like an internal culture where everybody knows what the person next to them earns, how much equity they have, and that really creates a nice, welcoming like atmosphere, right? You're not constantly thinking about, oh, but that guy is earning more than me, why, etc. Because you can come to me, I can explain why the situation is like that. And if it's not fair, we can review as well, right? And it also means that it doesn't matter, let's say, where you went to university. It doesn't matter what your background is. It just matters what you do at the company. And so people at the same level earn the same salary and have the same equity. And we don't base the thing about your past performance or your past life, and also your ability to negotiate a better salary and better equity. Because some people are just better negotiators. That does not mean that they deserve higher salary than somebody that is not a better negotiator, right? It's all about like what you can bring to the table and being very transparent about it. Frameworks of changing frameworks if they required. That's not the Bible or anything like that. And being very generous, or at least as much as you can, because it's the only thing.
Interesting. And I am definitely going to look up your resources and the available information on the frameworks and how you go about it at Even. I would love to know quickly on the fact, if you could also help the audience and me understand a little on how does a startup founder at an early stage go about creating the ESOP pool without taking too much time, but give an insight into what are the things that you need to consider, what is the percentage you set aside, how do you have that conversation. Give us that insight, Matty.
Yeah, so I guess the most important, like everybody has an ISO. Let's start from the basics, right? The ISO pool is basically some options that you can give to employees so they become actually owners in the company as well, right? So for each and every position, normally people have different like percentages that they give to employees, right? Depending on the level of seniority, the type of, also when you join the company, right? That's very important. Normally, when you have a team of 10 people, they tend to get much more equity than when you have a team of 200 people and somebody's joining, right? Because the risk is much higher for them joining on day zero than it is when you've got your Series A, Series B, and things like that. So the way that normally founders do it is that they set an ISO pool of I guess the general rule would be about like 10%. That's what I see in the market. Maybe in India and slightly lower at seed and pre-seed than it is globally. We've done like 50% just straight out of the gate, and that ISO pool is supposed to uh, really depends on like how much generous you want to be, right? But for us, that ISO pool actually we thought, hey, we will probably use it at Series A. Most people actually like use an ISO pool of 15% for much longer, right? Because they give less equity. So it all depends on that, and obviously, there are really important that I believe you reward for the start with you at day zero, right? So just to give you some examples, like when we started, it was about 2 years ago. Myself and my two co-founders, I've got two co-founders, amazing co-founders that I've worked with and been friends since I was really in like elementary school, and then my other co-founder, we've done a company together previously. So that's also very important. It's like um, your relationship with co-founders, but that's a whole another story, and I'm very lucky. But the way that we started was like we added straight members when we had zero money, uh, zero idea of what we were doing. They were Animesh and Rona. So Animesh was basically leading operations at Narayana Healthcare, which is a massive hospital chain, and Ronak was the head of risk at two health insurers already, right? So these are people that everybody wants to hire, and very hard to get them to in their jobs, join you when you have zero money. And the way that you do that is putting yourself in their shoes, right? Like what would make you join three crazy people doing something completely new when you've got families, they are also older than us, and like they have whole lives So how do you convince them? And obviously, part of that is like making them, owners in the company, giving them an offer that is actually very generous and that you would accept in the first place, right? There are very few um, startups that would join, but definitely the things that I would look for is somebody that takes me seriously and makes me an owner in the company as well, right? And yeah, so that's how it works at the beginning, and then going on. Obviously, you've got many new joiners that are frameworks again that are public and that can be refreshed over time. And
Sure, thank you. And I think the insight that I definitely do was the fact that while globally the standard is about 10%, in India it's still fairly lower at the moment when it comes to startups, especially at an early stage and pre-stage, where they look at a smaller ESOP pool. But that's where we can probably learn and get more insights at what's happening at a global level. Talking about that. I do know, Marty, that you've had a diverse experience. You have a very diverse portfolio as an investor as well, and also you've been across the world. You've been in Italy, you've been in US, you've been in UK, you're here right now in India. I am curious. What do you see? That surprises you as somebody who's stayed across the globe and as also somebody who's running a venture on your own. What surprises you, and where do you still see is a huge gap when it comes to startups and the whole startup ecosystem and the startup story?
in India or globally?
uh, in India, and how do you see that in comparison to?
Very interesting. So I think, like in a way, it's a market that is very hard not to be optimistic about, right? There is an incredible growth story, told, right? It's like growing massively when like other countries are obviously right now, especially in a very awkward and weird situation with when it comes to their economy. Um, there is a lot of investment coming from outside as well as inside. I think like in a way, the biggest mistake that somebody coming to India can make about India is that India is just catching up with the West, right? That's simply not true. Like, I think India is on a completely different trajectory altogether. They've set up like amazing technology to actually speed up adoption of so many different things, from like the national health stack when it comes to our industry, to e-commerce, to obviously payments, UPI, etc. And that's like remarkable, right? But in a way, the thing that is missing in India, which is also like the reason why I'm here, right, is that there is very low market penetration when it comes to very essential products. So find access to financial markets, right? Like about I think 2 or 3% of the population actually has access to financial markets, and that's deeply unfair because obviously financial markets make you rich, right? You invest in the market in 10 years, it definitely returns you much more money than you put in, average of 10% or wherever you are, obviously change, compounding over time. And access to, health insurance, for example, like only 4 to 5% of the Indian population has actually access to health insurance and health insurance products. So in a way, there is this like massive growing middle class that still not everybody, middle class as well as obviously everybody else, has access to essential products. So this is the reason why I'm here, right? I think in India you will have companies as big as Alibaba and Tencent, but not in boring industries, let me say it, like advertising and gaming, but actually in industries that really matter, like healthcare and finance. So I guess that's like where I'm coming from, and in a way, like why.
Yeah. You talked about healthcare, you talked about the penetration being very low, but talking about even, for our audience again, though the penetration is fairly low when it comes to healthcare and the coverage and the insurance and everything that's there, what is it that you're setting out to do differently with Even? Because there are definitely so many players in the industry, yet there's low penetration. There's still massive, for the sheer size of population in India, there's still a lot of market that needs to be covered. But what is it that you're set out to do differently with Even? I would love to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess like Even is the first managed care provider for it, right? By this I mean existing products that you have out there from very established insurance providers as well as like the majority of startups. Uh, Focuses on hospitalization, right? So whenever you get very, very ill, you go to the hospital, that's when you really think about your insurance. You're like, oh, okay, I'm here. I need to pay this medical bill. Let me pull my insurance. Oh, wait, what was my insurance name? Let me just review all the papers. Let's call them. And obviously, the experience normally with the claims processing, unless at least from our experience and what we've learned in the industry, is not exactly the best, right? It takes a lot of time to actually get the payment, get in touch with insurance partner is probably not the
Yeah.
best experience ever. There's very low trust in that equation, right? There are very different interests. Insurance company obviously, makes more money if it doesn't pay the claims, and the customer who all of a sudden, also in a moment where there's a lot of anxiety around being in the hospital in the first place and being very ill, that's not really the best on all fronts. So even in a way, completely different in the sense that we offer hospital cover through one of our insurance partners, but we do much more. So we actually make sure that you never get ill in the first place. So we have doctors in our team. We have a team of experienced doctors here on board that from you sign up to Even actually give you, a health body checkup. They are there for you 24/7 for whatever you might need and things like that, and create basically the best clinical pathway for you to stay healthy and never get to the hospital. So let's say you are somebody with PCOS, right? What people don't know is that actually there are clinical things that we can do to actually have an impact on that. So nutrition, mental health, physical exercise, they all help, right? So in that case, in your chat with our doctors and medical team, they are there for you 24/7 to actually nudge you to do the best things for your health, right? And we've seen it already. We've done like several trials and tests with people with type 2 diabetes, right? And actually, a huge percentage of them, after our protocols, basically went into remission of type 2 diabetes, right? So now they're not diabetic anymore. So it's all about like how do you actually take care of your members way before they get to the hospital, right? And we have also an economic incentive of doing that because obviously, if you keep your members healthy, you have fewer people going to the hospital, and obviously your claims are much better. It is very complicated, obviously, as a company, and this is the reason why not many have tried this. But I guess that's really where the real opportunity is, right? It's like how can you scale affordable healthcare that does not only take care of you when you're ill, but actually much earlier than that, keeps you healthy and really creates the best possible product out there. Obviously, when it comes to hospitalization, we're also, I guess, much better than any other product out there because we're completely cashless. So you just speak to our doctors, they activate your scanner. We have an app. You go to any hospital or clinic, just scan the UPI payment, and that's done. So, yeah, that's kind of what we do at Even, why we think we're different.
Interesting. And, that also makes me see now the fact that a lot of healthcare insurance providers are also hopping onto this because they see the point that, if a person is not hospitalized, the incentive, by giving them incentives, the fact that you can actually the mass of whatever premium is coming through to you is actually better off not being utilized as an insurance provider. And that's interesting as an insight for me because the work that you're doing is definitely then creating a lot of impact. You talked about how a lot of type 2 diabetes patients actually have gone back to a better lifestyle. So, thank you for sharing that and how this is really impacting lives in a better way. And coming to the point that you are an angel investor, the fact that you're a woman who's investing into startups, and you're also an entrepreneur who happens to be a woman. One thing that I do know is that only about 1.43% between 2018 and 2020, only 1.43% of the funding actually went to women-led ventures. Um, what do you think needs to change, Marty, for this to change significantly? Where do you see is still a big gap? Is it more from the perspective of women not coming up enough, or is there something else to the story?
I mean, this is a very difficult question, right? And I don't have an answer that I am sure is correct. But it's a matter of so many different, like the reasons are so many, right? From like where so many women go to university to the way that women are educated to the opportunities that they have in comparison to like men, etc. I guess like I do need to say that I think that the trend is like going into the right direction. That's for sure. I'm seeing many more like women entrepreneurs. I'm seeing many more people interested in entrepreneurship in the first place. But what they need is like I guess obviously access to opportunities, but at the same time like examples, right, of people that are there as investors because obviously there are tons of research that show that you tend to like people like you, right? So if every single partner in a
Yeah.
firm is a man, that's not going to be good, right? In terms of like then create a diverse
Yeah.
portfolio. And I guess the good thing is that LPs are starting to realize that, and that diversity is actually a massive asset, and therefore are investing more in diverse teams in venture capital firms, right? So that's like number one. Second, obviously, entrepreneurship. Like, how do we make sure that there is more diversity in founders? How do we make sure that like women get into tracks even as early as high school and university that are more likely to do entrepreneurship in the first place, right? In my small, my small contribution in a way, like I try and invest as well as talk to as many female entrepreneurs as I can, connect with like angels, women that are angels as well. They're as much as I can, but I guess this is gonna take time. Although I do see like good trends, like I see many more women entrepreneurs actually raising money now than used to, right? But like, and this might sound a bit
Yeah.
controversial, right? I never personally do women only fund, for example, right? Because in a way you want to stand out and win because you are the best, not because you are a woman or because you are
Yeah.
other like minorities, right? I guess like in a way, being a woman, being an immigrant myself, I don't want to win because I'm an immigrant, because I'm a woman, etc. I want to win because I'm the best, and I, believe that I can be the best at some things, and I will work my ass off to prove that I'm the best. And that's like the type of mentality that I would love to see, and people being confident enough to actually believe that in the first place, and
Yeah.
not to request things just because they are minorities.
Absolutely. And with that, I would love to also know that what are three things that you would recommend to founders that they must definitely not do when it comes to raising funds? Three absolute must not do's.
Okay. Firstly, raising funds, especially as first-time founder, one of the most terrifying experiences out there. So good luck to everybody who's doing it, especially in the market, because obviously, it's not as easy as it might have been even just a year ago. I guess in terms of like not do, the first one is to not have recruited an amazing team. As I say, always like the number one priority. And going to an investor meeting saying, hey, me, my co-founder was amazing as well as like 40 employees that you've been able to recruit for having money. That shows me that, you have the capacity of actually delivering something that is truly, truly remarkable without the need for money, right? And that's like sets you apart.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you like really people that do that, right? The majority of the people go there with a deck saying, hey, me and my co-founder, that's it. Like then we're gonna recruit when we have money. But it's not true, because if
Yeah.
you have like, if you are like somebody who can, yeah, basically convince people, which is the number one maybe priority for founders, as well as somebody who's generous enough and somebody that has a mission that people can buy into, then you're able to, right? To be alone. That's number one. Number two, in a way, another mistake that I see most of the time is that, founders spend a ton of time on strategy for even starting the company, right? So they would compile this like
Mm.
amazing financial models that show like their margins in 9 years' time, when they actually don't have an idea of how the business is gonna look like. And I
Yeah.
promise you, as like a second-time founders, really know that that's all BS, right? And what they should actually focus on, rather than very long deck, let's get a website live somehow. Let's get some customers. Let's start speaking to them. Let's get like some clients. Let's get some real stuff done for going to conference, right? Not all the deck and
Hmm.
the storytelling and everything. The third, I guess, one very important thing: speak as much as you can to founders, not just you know. Yeah, basically go with what you think the reality, because of founders are normally tend to be like very nice for everybody, and they're always happy to connect for you or to tell you their own experience, etc. So
Hmm.
don't like close yourself in a room uh, writing this deck, but actually go out there, ask for the best investors, what have they done that was successful, what mistakes they've done that they they can tell you. And that,
Great. And, as you talk about it, also reminds me a lot about some conversations I've had with, many other CXOs who've interviewed on CXO Talks. And a lot of these conversations seem to have an overlap in terms of the insights that you're also sharing. One, I would definitely, you talked about mistakes. I would love to know what are some you're a second time founder. I'd love to know some mistakes that you made, and also, tell me about some metrics that you tracked when you were starting up first time, and what is different this time around. Is there anything different that you're tracking this time around? Talk about some startup metrics that you try to track and that help you scale and grow. So your mistakes and the metrics that you tracked and that you track now.
I mean, I've made tons of mistakes, really lots and lots of mistakes. I guess maybe the one mistake that I deeply regret, that is probably the biggest one that I made with my previous startup, was not thinking enough about the market. So basically, I came to the realization, and you read this all the time, but you never really understand it until you get hurt, basically, which is, hey, there is a market. I love that market. Me was journalism, right? I love journalism. I think it's very important. Everybody should be informed. Everybody should have access to really high quality information, especially young people. Who disagrees with that? Nobody, right? Like, I guess nobody does. But for me, it was like really a mission. And I guess like when I got into starting my first company, I was like, okay, great, that sounds good. Like that's a good thing to focus on, and you're passionate about it. So let's go and build a company, raise VC money around it, and let's hope that people will actually pay for it. When every single person that was like a veteran in the industry, every single venture capitalist, even people that gave me money, told me, look, we're actually giving the money because I think your team is amazing, but realistically, like journalism is an industry that unfortunately is shrinking. There are not many people that
Yeah.
pay for it, and young people just don't do that, right? It's not a market that you can ride. The market that's going down. And I was 24 years old. I didn't want to believe that that was the case. I thought I could save it and solve it. And, you very quickly realize that it doesn't matter how good you are, it doesn't matter how good your team is, it doesn't matter how good your product is, but you just cannot beat the market. So now,
Yeah.
just amazing. Like, we have created, I believe, what is the best product out there. And people really need, right? And they really want it. So our problem is like the other way around. Like, how can you actually be very quick at, enrolling as many members as they come, and like how to build the perfect experience. And we're constantly obsessed about being the best product out there. But definitely, we're not obsessed about like, hey, where are these prospects? Will they pay? Because actually, the market is growing so massively, and yeah. So always go in a market that is actually growing. Not don't go into a market that is shrinking. If you want to, build a big company, obviously there are many people that are very happy, and that's amazing with lifestyle businesses. They don't need to scale, but if you get money, that means you need to scale, and that means that the market is very important.
Yeah. And that's a very important insight, I think, to know what the market is, what the market size is for that matter. It's a very important aspect you touched upon. And I know we're pressed for time because you have a hard stop in a few minutes. And I would love to quickly get on to our CXO show ritual. So at CXO Talks, one, I would love to know firstly that what is it that you follow as a ritual every day, Marty? Every day, every week, is there a ritual that kind of keeps you sane amidst all the chaos that building a startup and building an enterprise comes with? That's the first question, and then I'll come to the second part.
Yeah, like 100%. This is a very good question. So I guess like being a founder of a startup is like a and constant roller coaster, mentally, physically, and everything. So yes, I do have goals. So for me, for example, it's really really important to exercise every day. So the first thing I do as I wake up is like 1 hour, whatever it is. Might be like tennis, swimming, yoga, like anything, walking, and that is really like the most important thing for me, because it's like better than therapy, right? So exercise is really, really important, and just like being healthy, right? So for me, for example, I just realized, I'm 31, I'm 31 now, and I need, I need to sleep. I really need to sleep. So basically, I cut out the majority of my evenings out. Like I very rarely go out. I'm very boring, and I am very happy with being so boring because that allows me to have, 7 to 8 hours a night, to then wake up very refreshed and ready, right? So I guess for me, like sleep and exercise are like very, very important things. And obviously, on top of that, making sure that you are very well connected with a few people that are really important, right? Like I completely stopped caring about having as many friends as possible, but I do deeply care about having great relationships with, my boyfriend, uh, 3 or 4 like very important friends, my co-founder, some people I work with, which actually enrich me rather than just going out and drinking and the day after not having the strength to go for a swim.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. So I always like I never know what to answer, because while I made mistakes, I'm actually very happy about the mistakes that I made, because obviously they taught me something, right? And to be honest, like I'm very happy of the life that I have now, right? I think I'm extremely lucky to be working on something so like exceptionally important with people that I do it with. So I don't want to change anything in particular. Like all the figures were actually quite maybe one thing that I would change is uh, still thinking when I say it. Is maybe studying something different at college. So I did political science, which like a bit of uh, everything and nothing really. There are a lot of like other fields that I am currently much more interested in from kind of weirdly neuroscience. Like I listen to podcasts all the time on that, and I just feel like maybe I should have like followed my gut a little bit more and not going into something that was like as generic as possible, so that that would not close me any doors. But yeah, maybe. But who knows what would have happened in that case, right? If I didn't go to the LSE, but I went to some like other university, I would not have met my co-founder. Like so many things that like I don't know how they would have ended up.
Yeah, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's obviously I'm not a doctor. I'm in the sector of healthcare, but I'm not a doctor. But I am obsessed with any type of healthcare podcast, from like Uberman, Sam Harris, to live better, live more. There are so many that I. So I think I'm really intrigued about like some topics in particular, like how do you really optimize your health to be the better version of yourself, both mentally and physically. And so that's what I listen to. I actually listen very few podcasts that are about business, because obviously my life is about business all the time. So when I listen to podcasts, just like normally walk and yeah, want to kind of switch off and recharge. So that's what I listen to. It's just something I'm very interested in. Hmm. So I think one thing that we've not touched upon is like what makes a great entrepreneur, right? And I guess one of the many things that makes an entrepreneur is like the fact that entrepreneurs tend to be uh, very optimistic. Like in a way, there's almost an optimism bias in entrepreneurs, right? Like they think that things will turn out well. And I think that, because you think that things will turn out well and you are optimistic, and I'm very optimistic myself, you change your behavior, you do that particular thing that many people don't do and risk it. And there is a little bit of like self fulfilling optimism in life, right? Like because you believe you can do it, then you do it, and sometimes it works. And it's, I guess, the only way that you can do something very risky is when you weirdly and optimistically think you can do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't even try it. And so, one of the questions for the next guest is like, what are they? Thank you so much, Tony. It was a pleasure to speak with you.